Welcome to the Life You Love podcast. We're your hosts, Grace Lemire and Erin Convertini. This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers, for the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to. We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love. As girls in our mid-20s who both currently live in new cities, we get so many questions about whether we think it's worth it, how to choose somewhere to live, and how to make the most of your experience. This is such a perfect time to film this episode because this is actually the week that I'm moving back to my home city of Pittsburgh. So I'm so excited to chat all about all things moving away. I feel like we have really good perspectives on this because we're in two pretty popular places. I've been here for a year and then Grace moved more recently. And obviously, like I just said, I actually made the decision to move back home. So in today's episode, we're answering some of your frequently asked questions about moving to a new city in your 20s. So if you've been on the fence about it, this episode is for you.
I just love this topic because I think you get to this point, especially in your 20s, where a lot of times people want something new, but moving can feel like such a big decision. And we've both navigated it in the last year or so in different ways. Well, last 2 years, I feel like almost, with me moving out of my parents, then moving here, and you moving from Pittsburgh to Nashville, and now from Nashville back to Pittsburgh. So I'm excited. I feel like we can get straight into the first question here. So we asked on our Instagram stories for questions about just life questions, and then we got so many, we decided to break it out into different sections. So that's why we're doing a whole moving focused episode. So some of these questions have more context than others because people were submitting with their stories. But this question says, what is your best advice for deciding where to live as a woman in your late 20s? I see that Grace moved to Florida and loves it, and Erin chose to move back to her hometown. I work remotely, so I could technically live anywhere, making the decision harder at times. I currently live in a high cost of living area near my hometown, and except for when I was in college, I've lived within an hour of home. Sometimes I think about how much farther my money could go if I moved out of state. I also think about getting out of my comfort zone to try something totally new. Thank you.
Yeah, I love this question too because this was kind of the situation that Grace and I were both in. The one caveat being, as you were reading that, I realized that this person said that they're in their late 20s, and Grace and I were in the first half of our 20s when we decided to move to a new state. So that's a little bit of a difference, but we were both in the situation where we worked remote and our jobs weren't dependent on where we lived, literally in the slightest, which definitely can make it harder because you feel like you have every single option in the world. And you, especially when you start to get into your late 20s and your 30s, I'm sure it's even more true that you kind of feel like you only have one shot to move somewhere new and you don't want to make the wrong choice. You end up just not going anywhere because you put it off, and yeah, you don't know where you should go. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I have is really just to trust your intuition, which I feel like some people hate to hear that because it's a non-answer. We don't have an answer for you, but it's so true. I didn't know that I wanted to move to Nashville up until probably 2 months before I moved here. And for me, it was a matter of I turned 25 and I realized that I've been in Pittsburgh my entire life. And if I didn't move soon, I didn't think that I was ever going to. So I was yeah, I'm 25. Going into the back half of my 20s. And if I stay here for another year, I could meet someone and then never move away. Yeah, I could just decide to stay in Pittsburgh forever. So I really wanted to move and I kind of made the decision pretty quickly. And after that, it was just a matter of trusting my intuition and kind of going with the first city that came to my mind, as silly as that sounds, to make huge life decisions just on what you're feeling. But it's not I spent a ton of time in Nashville before I moved down here. Before I moved here, I think I came to Nashville, not counting the time that I came down to tour apartments, because that was after I made the decision to move here. I've only been to Nashville twice, and all I did while I was here was go drink on Broadway with my friends. So it's not I knew a ton about the city. I didn't really know anyone here. I kind of just had a gut feeling that it's where I was supposed to be moving to. The only other city that crossed my mind was Austin, but in my head, I kind of knew there was a little bit of a distinction between the two because I felt I should move to Austin because I saw a lot of other content creators moving to Austin. And it's not I didn't know anything about Austin. I've literally never been there before when I was thinking about it. But it was kind of well, other people are moving there, so I should feel I need to move there as well. Whereas Nashville, I just had that gut intuition of oh, that seems like the right next step for me. So I would say just trust your intuition and go where your heart is telling you.
Yeah, I think there's So I have so many thoughts here because I am someone who, it's not that I'm indecisive, but I care so much about making a decision that I feel at peace with at the end of the day that sometimes I would think too hard and I'd worry so much about making the right decision. And I saw this woman, the video is actually like making another round again on social media. It goes viral every so often, but I've told this story before on the podcast. Essentially, she was some sort of like advisor or something at an Ivy League school, kind of like a Harvard or a Yale. And she would always work with students who would come to her and say, I wish I went to Harvard or Yale. I don't remember which one she was at, but they would say wish they went to the other one. And they would say, like, I just feel like I would have been happier there. And she would say, like, your idea of regret, oh, I would have been happier there, and you having regrets is based on what you think it would be like there. But you actually have no evidence to know whether it would be better in another option. So instead of trying to focus, because they would say, I just made the wrong decision. And she would say to them, instead of focusing on like so hard on making the right decision, focus on making a decision and then making that decision right. And I was like just like mind blown because I was like, holy crap, like I am the kind of person who will kind of adapt. So if I go somewhere where, like, even living in the suburbs back home, I was not very happy in the suburbs, but I found ways to experience joy and enjoy my space and whatever, even though it wasn't my end all be all place I wanted to be forever. So I made that decision and then I made that decision right. So no matter where I went, I knew, okay, even if I decide I get there and I realize it's not the end all be all, I don't want to be here forever, I can still experience joy there. It's not going to be the end of the world. And that took so much pressure off of me when I started to think about where I wanted to go. The second thing I will say on this was I tried to focus on what I was looking for in a city, like what things actually matter to you at the end of the day. And the way that I tend to view it is optimized for your day to day and things that are important to you. For example, some people, like I know some people in Florida who they like the beach, but they don't have a desire to be at the beach like every week. So living an hour away, an hour and a half away, more inland, maybe in like in Orlando or something, is totally fine with them because their day to day and what brings them joy does not involve a beach. Or I have a friend who moved to Charlotte after I moved. It was like a few weeks after I moved down to Florida. She moved down to Charlotte and she absolutely loves it. And she's a few hours away from the beach. For me, because I like being close to the water and having the option to drive over there any time of day if I wanted to, that would be too far for me. But for her, that's perfect because she doesn't have that desire to be there as frequently. So think about what makes you happy on a day to day. Think about demographic that you would like to see around you, right? So if you are in your late 20s, maybe having more people in their 20s and 30s is important to you. So living in a small, like for example, being in Sarasota in Florida, Sarasota skews a little bit older. There are young people there, but it is not like the most hip and happening place, right? You might enjoy like a St. Pete or a Tampa more. And obviously just speaking to my area. And then when it comes to the intuition thing, I wanted to make one note. Your intuition and your ego are just like they're aspects of your emotional state, and your ego is a part of your brain that tries to keep you safe, because your brain's job as is your brain an organ? That's probably a dumb question, but like
Yeah, I think
as
so.
it, right? Oh, like
I
what? I know
think
your skin's an organ. Oh
we're
my
not
gosh! So
scientists.
I was gonna say the STEM girlies listening to this are like, ladies, please. Well, I'm so sorry. But anyways, your brain, it has to be an organ. What the heck else could it be? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know.
Anyways, just scratch that. Forget I never asked it, guys. But anyways, your brain, its job in your body is to protect you and keep you safe. So it tries to avoid things that threaten it and threaten its safety. So when you are, but that's not always, these aren't always a bad thing. It's just things that challenge you. However, I used to have a hard time distinguishing between, is this my intuition or my ego? Is it just if I had like a feeling about something, is this like, okay, this is a good idea, I should go after this, or is it just the part of my brain keeping me safe? Because the idea of moving to a whole new city might make you feel a little bit anxious. But how do I know, is it still a good choice? And I'm just nervous about this, or is this like the part of my brain that, or is this my intuition saying, don't go do this? Or is this a part of my brain saying, like, I'm just scared, right? So the way that what I learned was that your intuition will come to you, or start with your ego. Your ego will always feel very frantic and very like out of nowhere. So when I would think about moving sometimes to St. Pete, I would sometimes get a random like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? Right. And it would come like completely out of nowhere. I knew that's not my intuition being like, don't go there. It's just a part of my brain being like, whoa, I see a threat on the horizon because I know that this feels like out of my comfort zone. But whenever I thought, really like would think about moving to St. Pete, I felt calm. And when I came and visited here, I felt calm. Even when I would try to think about moving to Austin, which was like one of the cities I did not like that I looked at, I was like, I would feel like unsettled. And it never came out of nowhere. It was always like in a moment where I was in a neutral emotional state. If I thought about moving to Austin, it made me anxious. If I thought about moving to St. Pete, it made me feel calm. So I would think about that too. That was a big thing that helped me in figuring out where I want to go. And also know that I've talked about this in the podcast too, run through the best, worst, and most likely case scenario. So like that also took a lot of pressure off for me. Best case scenario, I move somewhere I absolutely love it. My life's perfect. I want to stay there forever. Worst case scenario, I go there, I hate it. But because of the type of person I am, I make the most out of it for a year and I leave. Or I hate it so much, I can't even make the best out of it. I break my lease and I move back to where I was. Okay, that's really not that bad of a scenario. And the most likely case scenario is that you move there. There are some good days, some bad days, some things you like, some things you don't like. And at the end of when your lease is, you decide whether you want to stay there long term or not. And if you don't, you go to another city or you go back where you were from or you choose to stay there. Like, okay, like what's truly the worst that happens? You can't make a wrong choice. Just make a choice and focus on making that choice right.
I love what you said about make the decision and then make it right, because the one thing that I said was the city that you move to is actually not as important as the neighborhood that you move to within that city. And that's something that I learned moving to Nashville, because luckily for me, Nashville's not a huge city in terms of like I can get from one neighborhood south of the city to one neighborhood north of the city in like 20 minutes, even with traffic. It doesn't take long to get around. But if you lived in a city where it takes like an hour to get between the neighborhoods, this is even more prevalent. But the neighborhood that you live in is going to do so much for how much you enjoy your experience in this new city. One thing that you have to consider when you're deciding on whether or not to move to a new city is how are you going to go and like look around that place to pick an apartment, see if you want to live there. Some people give the advice that you should go spend like if you work remote, go spend a month in the city, like get a 1 month furnished Airbnb and spend a month there. I don't love that advice because I honestly think it can deter people from going at all, because you get there, you're probably not going to make any friends because you really don't live there yet. And then if you go spend a whole month there, you're probably going to get lonely and then think that it's a bad idea. So I would like probably not go spend a month in the city that you're thinking of moving to, but I think it's good to spend like maybe 4-ish days to give yourself enough time to not only go to like the little tourist spots within the city, but also actually look at all of the neighborhoods that people live in when you live there and decide which one is right for you. So for example, in Nashville, after this comes out, I'll already be moved so I can talk about like where I live, but I live in a part of town called Wedgwood, Houston, and it's right south of the city. It's like honestly really good proximity to the city. My apartment complex is cute, but there's not a lot of young people here. So like when I'm walking Bella, it's super residential and it kind of feels like I'm the only one walking up and down the street. Like it's just a little bit strange. And it's also being built up right now. So there's a ton of construction everywhere. Whereas literally every single one of my friends in Nashville lives up in Germantown, which all of that construction happened 5 years ago. So now it's really built up. It's such a cute part of town. There's so many restaurants and bars and little like walking paths. And it's just a really cute area, and I go up there all the time to like walk Bella, go on a walk with my friends. There's so much going on. We just went to this like outdoor concert series that they have up in Germantown in the summer, so there's so much that goes on. So like even though I loved my experience in Nashville, I probably would have loved it more if I chose the right neighborhood. So that's something to think about in terms of like making your decision right, because every city has cute little pockets of it, and that's going to be optimizing for your day to day.
I completely agree with the not going somewhere long term. I know I have mentioned before that I lived in California for 6 weeks. My friend and I just did like, we called it a workcation, where we went and worked and like vacationed at the same time. Basically, we just lived in we lived in California for 6 weeks, a month in LA and 2 weeks in San Francisco. But when I did stays in other cities. Like last year, I looked at 5 other cities besides Boston before I moved. I was only doing a few days in each one. I think I was in Austin for like 3 days. I was in St. Pete and Tampa for 4, did 2 days in each one, 4 days, I think, in San Diego. And then I went down to Nashville to visit Erin. And that was one of the cities that I considered. We were there for the rebrand of the podcast. So I don't even remember how many days I was there, but the focus wasn't like touring apartments. But I just went, and like I only came to St. Pete for literally for like basically 48 hours, less than that, before I decided to move here. And I think that, like you said, staying there for a prolonged period of time can be a good way to get a better feel for the city. However, because you're not there permanently, like if someone comes here and they're like, oh yeah, I'm only here for a couple weeks, it's not really a friendship I'm gonna like nurture and be like, yeah, let's go here, here, and here, like while you're in town, because you're literally not gonna be here in a couple of weeks. And it's just not, I don't know, I think at some point you just gotta like pull the trigger and go. One thing I'll say with this person who's like, I work remote, and that can make it harder. It definitely does. Give yourself a certain parameter around what cities you're going to look at. So once you have the list of, okay, here's what I'm looking for in a city, be very serious with yourself about which ones actually meet those criteria and which ones don't. Because in hindsight, I mean, obviously I was in Nashville to visit you for the podcast rebrand, and I had it on my list as a city to look at because I just was like, it would be good for the podcast. We could film episodes in person, like da da da. But then actually looking at what I was looking for, it wasn't coastal, nor was Austin. And I did want to look at Austin because it was entrepreneurial, and that was something I was looking at. And St. Pete isn't as entrepreneurial. However, it didn't meet, like there were several boxes that some of these cities, I mean, most of them met all of the boxes, but like Nashville didn't check all the boxes, nor did Austin. But I also was at one point was going to look at Charlotte and at Charleston. And then I was like, Charleston is too small. Like that's not what I'm looking for. So why am I going to bother going there? Charlotte is way more inland than I'm looking for. I'm looking somewhere that's more coastal. Why would I waste my time looking there? Like I'm just not going to. Like, and if I get to the end of my lease here and decide, okay, I do want to live, I want to go check out Charleston or Charlotte or whatever to see how I feel about living there, okay, then I will. But be very serious with yourself about what you're looking for. And then I said 5. I'll look at 5 cities, and like that's it. I'm not going to any more than 5, and I'll see how I feel from there. And I think it's good to have parameters around what you're looking for
I
and not
agree.
give yourself too many options.
Yeah, too many options is only going to delay the process because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just make a decision and go somewhere. I think the other part of making a decision right is like really giving yourself a fair shot in the place that you choose to go to, because at the end of the day, your experience is what you make of it. I just posted about this on social media this morning where I said, like, the grass is green where you water it. And that's so true for where you live, because this could be meaning like just moving to a new part of the city that you currently live in and making a point to have better hobbies and make new friends and go out and do more and have more experiences. But it's also true if you do decide that it's right for you to go experience a new city, because when you get there, you're going to have such a different experience if you sit in your house 24/7 versus whether you go out and try to make new friends and have hobbies and go do things and experience the city that you just spent all of this money to go move to. So I think that's a benefit of trusting your intuition and going with the city that feels exciting to you, because when you get there, you're going to be excited to get out of your house and actually go experience the city, rather than if you move somewhere random that you're not super excited about, then you might not go out and do anything. And then you are going to be lonely. You are going to hate it there. Like that's going to be your experience because you're not giving it a fair shot.
100%. And that goes into our next question. We get asked this all the time. I feel like I get this so much whenever I talk about St. Pete and living here, because I do these like monthly update videos. People always ask like, how do you make friends and meet people in a new city? And I will say, moving to a city and making friends here, I haven't had to like go out and make new friends since I like went to college, because when I moved home to my parents' house, I just had my friends that were in the neighborhood, like friends from high school, and I hadn't lived anywhere else. So I didn't really like need to. And I wasn't necessarily worried because I knew I'm in a city, there's gonna be plenty of young people. And there were already people who had messaged me on social media who wanted to meet up. And some of those people are some of my like best friends here. So I knew I was going to have that. And I also, before I moved here, I looked for different ways to meet people. So I was like, okay, what are some like networking events I could go to, or, groups I could join, or things like that. And I also knew too that St. Pete is a very friendly city, and that was something that was important to me. The community here is amazing, and people are genuinely so nice. Like the second you meet someone, they're like, "Oh, I want to like, oh, let me introduce you to this person," or like, "We should come to this thing." And all of a sudden, like so many more people. And it's also a small city, which I feel like to me that was like better. Like I just like the vibe. So I felt better going into it, but the way that I've made friends, and I feel like this might like help people just like think about how much it can really grow. So I joined, well, when I first moved in, it was like 2 days after I got here. I was carrying some cardboard boxes out of my apartment, and my neighbor walked by me and was like, "Oh my gosh, hey, are you moving in?" And we started talking to each other. We exchanged numbers, and I've hung out with her several times since. I've met some of her friends. And I literally had plans like to hang out with them like 5 days after I moved in. So don't be afraid to say hi to people in your complex, especially if you see them like moving their stuff in, because they could be somebody who is from out of state and also has no friends, or someone who just moved into the city from the suburbs, or like whatever the case may be. So always say hi. I found people are so friendly and want to meet people here. Also, go to your apartment complex's events if you live in a complex. I've met a few people at the events, and they're not necessarily like best friends that I hang out with, but they're friendly faces, which just gives you that sense of community. I would look for your city's Girls Who Walk group. There's a company, I don't know who owns it, but it's called Girls Who Walk, and they have all these different ones in different cities. I joined the St. Pete Girls Who Walk group, and it's a group me, and I just went in. There's like a little channel for introducing yourself. I just introduced myself in the channel, and one of my very best friends here saw my message and just DM'd me and was like, "Hey, we sound like very similar people." And we met up to get coffee that week, and we're literally like the same person, different fonts. And so it's been super nice. She had lived here, she moved here a week after me, but she was more tapped in with the Christian community here. So then she was like, "Oh, you should come to church with me." I went to church with her and got to meet people that she knew, and then went to some of the faith-based events with her and got to know more people there. So that's in like the first couple of weeks after I'm here. I've now been introduced to two people and met their whole like friend groups that they already have. So I know a bunch more people. I also started going to coffee shops, and I would go to them like frequently, and I would just start to see familiar faces, and the number of people that you meet and start interacting with is just like grows and grows. And then also finding sports leagues, even if you're not like the most athletic person or sports aren't necessarily your thing, like find something that you can join on a routine basis, because that's having acquaintances and friends. To me, the difference is seeing people on a routine basis. So I know I talk about it all the time, but I love pickleball. It's become such a fun hobby of mine. I go to pickleball so much that I know almost everybody at those courts, and some of them are not my besties, right? Like people that I hang out with all the time, but they're people that they're friendly faces now. And so when I see them around the city, or they invite me to do things and we hang out and stuff, like, and I think that can make a big city feel small so fast, just showing up to the same places, even going to like church or striking up conversations in coffee shops, like I said, or any sort of, again, any sort of routine thing that you do over and over. But then the last thing I'll say is, when you go to things, because I think every city you can find things to go to, but the key is actually talking to people when you go to them. And I know that probably sounds like duh, but like you can go to a coffee shop and sit there with your headphones in all day and not say a peep to somebody, or like you can go to church and not say hi to anyone. You can go to pickleball and stand there off in the corner by yourself, but that's not going to get you friends. There's a perfect example of this. The other day I was at pickleball. This girl shows up. She's by herself. I'm standing there by myself, and I was just waiting for my turn. And she comes up to me and she's like, "Hi, what's your name?" And literally just sticks her hand out, and we shake hands, and she says her name and I say mine. And she's like, we just get to talking. She just talk, we're to start talking about pickleball, whatever. Turns out she's a sister in Christ. She's coming to the Bible study next week. We're talking about hanging out. Like, and it just went from her just having the 5 seconds of courage to like say, "Hey, what's your name?" and shake my hand. So like do that. Put yourself out there. Like be at a coffee shop and just take the 5 seconds of courage and be like, "Hi, I love your outfit. Like, I'm Grace. It's nice to meet you," whatever. You would be so surprised how receptive people are, because the same way that you want to make friends, everybody else does in the city too. So like a lot of people just don't have the courage to be the person who starts the conversation.
And I will say, when people start that conversation with you, learn how to have open-ended responses that prompt the conversation to continue going, because that's the easiest way. Like, as someone who has been on both sides of the coin, like I've started the conversation and people have also approached me. Like, let's say someone walks up to you at the gym and says, "Oh my gosh, I love your top." If you say thank you, the conversation ends. That girl's never going to talk to you again. If you say, "Oh my gosh, thank you, I got it here. Like, I love your outfit too. Where's that from?" Then the conversation has to keep going and you're naturally going to start talking and probably will end up becoming friends because you're at the same place. You already know that you like the same things. I will say too, finding places that people tend to show up to alone really helps. I've been a gym girl for so long and I've never really I actually made one of my really good friends in the gym in Nashville, but I've found that girls don't really walk up to each other in the gym because like everyone has their headphones on. Like, you're there to just like get it done. But fitness classes, people love to talk in, especially solid core. I don't know what it is, but like people love to talk after solid core, which like I love. We'll all be sitting at the lockers and everyone's talking. No one knows each other. Everyone's talking. So I feel like those are such good places to like, people are already by themselves. So it's easier to kind of like strike up a conversation when like they're already in that space where they don't know anybody. I feel like my situation in Nashville was like a little bit unique. And I feel like that's why I never really talked a lot or like tried to give tips on making friends in a new city, because I knew that my situation was a little bit unique, which is that literally the first week that I got here, all 4 of my best friends here, like best friends, love these girls to death. I'm like so sad to leave them. They all just DM'd me on Instagram because I'm a content creator and I post about my life. And so they DM'd me and they were like, "Hey, saw you moved here and you don't know anybody. Like, I'll be your friend basically." And so I met them and I was obsessed with them and now we're best friends. So I feel like that's why I kind of never like tried to give advice, because I'm like, that's not realistic for the average person that doesn't post their life on social media. But after being here for a year, I've started to like pick up on how other people are making friends. And for example, this one girl, we were just on a walk last night. She's a friend of a friend. And she was saying how she just moved into a house with 4 roommates. And the reason was because she's like, I know I'm going to meet literally so many people. And she's like, I'm single. I travel a lot for work. So like my housing situation doesn't really matter that much to me. I would rather be in a situation where I'm just in a season of life where I'm being really social and I want to meet a lot of people. So if you are moving to a new city and you're worried about not knowing anybody and you can tolerate having roommates, go on Facebook groups for whatever city you're moving to and try to find girl roommates and be their roommate. And that's going to give you automatically a couple of friends. Even if you're not best friends with them, it gives you people to go out and do things with initially. Because like you said, Grace, like once you meet that first friend, you meet their friends, then you do other things. And then it just kind of like gets the ball rolling. And like, that's the hardest part. It can feel really overwhelming to show up in a new city and try to make that first friend. But that, I agree with you on the apartment complex thing, because even if you don't want a roommate, your apartment complex kind of acts as like your fake roommates, because everyone else, like a lot of people also live there by themselves and they're probably trying to make friends as well. So you can do that if you don't want roommates.
Yeah, I think your point about being like a conversationalist too is so important. And I actually made a video about this where I said, like, I was like, no, like, it sounds dumb, but not rehearse, but go over in your head different ways to start a conversation, questions you can ask, and how to end the conversation. Because I think that's what freaks people out so much about introducing yourself. Because and also I feel like once you're in the conversation, it's really not that bad. But how do you actually start it? And like, what are you saying? And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, or like, what questions are you asking to like keep the conversation going? And I think some people do a really good job at it. And like you said, some people struggle where they're just like, thanks, I got, yeah, this top is from where, and then they just shut down. But like, even just go-to questions I've asked people or that people have asked me is like, oh, like, do you live in the area or do you live downtown? Or like, if I'm somewhere outside the city, or how long have you been playing pickleball? How long have you been coming to this gym? How long have you been coming to this coffee shop? Or like, oh, what coffee did you get? Like, I might try something new, even if you're not going to try anything new. Just, you know what I mean? Just like asking the questions. Or people will be like, oh, so are you from St. Pete, or did you move here because it's a big like transplant city? A lot of people aren't from here. Or, oh, is this your first Florida summer? Like, it's just, there's a lot of questions to ask, and it can be pretty basic questions, but having a few of those like in your back pocket that you can ask, that it can be go-tos, are so helpful in letting the conversation actually develop. Because it is easy to be like, like the girl who came up to me at pickleball, she initially was asking how that court, like how that park works, like with the racks, like, oh, so you just put it in the rack here or whatever, because she hadn't played at a court like it before or something. And so we were talking about that. I could have easily just been like, yep, you put your paddle up in the rack and that's it. But I was like, oh, how long have you been playing? And so we start having conversation. And then, I'm like, oh, what brought you to St. Pete? Like, when did you move here? Da, 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 da. And then she told me a little bit about her faith. And I said, oh my gosh, see my friend over there? I said, that's my friend. We go to these faith-based events. You should come with us. What's your phone number? Let me, whatever. So like it actually evolved from there. But if I just shut down the conversation, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. And then great, I have no friends.
Yeah, no, exactly. The last thing I'll say is you don't necessarily have to wait for these opportunities to come to you. Don't discount making friends online. Like, I think I've definitely told this story before on the podcast, but my best friend from Pittsburgh, we met on Bumble BFF. And she was actually the only girl that I went out with on like a girl date from Bumble BFF. And it just worked out. And we're still best friends to this day. But if it didn't work out, I probably would have went on other girl dates from Bumble BFF until I found someone that I clicked with. The other thing, if you don't want to use Bumble BFF, is back to the Facebook groups. Like, even if you're not necessarily looking for a roommate, there's a lot of Facebook groups of just like making friends in new cities, or the Girls Who Walk one that you mentioned, or just random Facebook groups of girls in the city that you live in. Go scroll through them and look at the girls that are posting, and then either message them on Facebook, or if people aren't like super active on Facebook, you can find their Instagram and DM them on Instagram and just be like, hey, I just moved here. I saw your post on whatever Facebook group. Like, I'm looking for friends. Basically, people are so friendly, and most people want more friends. Like, I would say more people than not would prefer to have more friends. So they actually really like when you go out of their way to try to make more friends. So it just gets the ball rolling, because a lot of people, like, I don't love to show up places alone. Like, I will, but I don't love it. I'm very, very introverted. So that's, again, just like getting the ball rolling, snowballing. Like, if you don't want to show up to all of these things alone, having a couple friends that you can go to things with to kind of get the ball rolling to meet even more people that you click with is super important. But let's get into the next one. So this question's so fun. It says, what does your perfect day in Nashville/St. Pete look like, or Pittsburgh/Boston? Would love recs for places to go and things to do. Okay. So I feel like for me, my ideal weekend is like honestly pretty chill. And this was a big realization that I had for myself this year, especially because Nashville is such a big drinking city. And like, moving down here, I knew that that wasn't my goal to like go out and drink heavily every single weekend, but I didn't think I fully realized how much I just like a chill weekend. I feel like my ideal, let's say Saturday, would be a slow morning for one. I love to just wake up and sit on my balcony and journal and make a cup of coffee and just like sit and hang out with my dog. Some type of exercise. One of the biggest things that I'm going to miss in Nashville is I love my gym so much. In Pittsburgh, I feel like we don't have any like gym clubs like an Equinox or a Lifetime. The one that I go to here in Nashville is called Carbon. And it's just such a good atmosphere. I love to like go and take my time and have a 2-hour workout and sit in the sauna on a Saturday, and then socializing for a few hours. And that could look like maybe like a workout class with my friends and then grabbing breakfast or lunch after, or going on a walk in a cute area of town, or lunch, grabbing a drink, whatever it may be. I do like to socialize on the weekends, but honestly only for a few hours, and then having just like a night in. I love to cook dinner on the weekends too. So I love a chill weekend. But the other part of this question was recommendations for things to do. And I tried to map out some things that aren't city specific. So these, like, depending on what city you live in, these all should apply. Again, going on a walk in a new part of town, walking through parts of town that have a lot of cute like boutiques and different stores is so fun to me. Not even just thrift stores, but like boutiques and like things that have little knickknacks. That's so fun. Actually looking up events in your city is so underrated. Even if you think you live in a smaller city, there's so much going on. You just have to like actually look up what's going on. For example, two that go on in Nashville, one is called Sunday Morning Club. And I know they have these all over the United States in bigger cities. In Nashville, they do them on Sundays, and it'll be just like a free event outside in different parts of the city. Sometimes they'll do like outdoor yoga, or I know sometimes they have like outdoor cold plunges. They'll do little mini concerts. Like, the themes are different every Sunday, but it was founded by guys who got sober and now they're like we don't spend our Saturday nights drinking and our Sunday mornings hungover anymore. So we want to give people things to do on Sunday mornings. So that's a cool little thing that you can look up in your city. Or I know Nashville also has a lot of like outdoor movie and concert series going on in the summer. So you can look for those as well. Or just little things like farmers markets, weekend markets, picnics in parks, just different things to get you out of the house.
Okay, I'm going to start with the recommendations for things to do, comment on that, and then talk about my ideal day. So, one of my best friends who moved, the one who moved to Charlotte, back when we lived at home in the suburbs, she was always doing something like different and fun with like her and her mom or her and her sister. They would always do something fun. And I was like, where are you finding these things? And it was just because she was so good at finding things to do online and just looking at like, go on Facebook and look at the Facebook events tab or join like the Facebook group for your city or your town. People are always sharing things that are, to do, or even just Googling like things to do in St. Pete. And there's usually different businesses that will share things like, there's like a website I think for St. Pete that shows like it's like a calendar of all the different events. And I feel like even in the suburbs, being so far out of the city, she was always finding things just because she went out of her way to find them. And I feel like that was such a good attitude to have. And that was always her attitude, is like, there are things, I just have to look for them. And it, depending on where you live, you might have to look a little harder than if you're in a city where there's always something. Like in New York City, you don't have to look very hard for something to do, but in the suburbs of Massachusetts, you probably will. But also like letting the little things be fun too, like you said, like walking in a new neighborhood and stuff. I actually feel like I had my ideal like day on this past Sunday. I like went to a new church with my friend, and I definitely love my home church the best, but it was nice to just like have a new experience, try something new. We went to church, and then I went on a date, but it wasn't the fact that I went on a date. It was like what we did that made it like a good day. But we went and got coffee at my favorite coffee shop, and it was just like nice and relaxing, just having like meaningful conversation. And then I went and played pickleball. And then after pickleball, I went home and I just like cleaned my apartment and just like had a relaxing evening and just like sat on my couch, and it was calm. And then I got into bed early and I did my whole night routine and journaled and read my book. Like it was a day full of so many things I love. And I went to the grocery store on the way home and like bought flowers and like put them on my island and stuff. And it was just like that is such a nice day to me. Like I think going to the beach and watching the sunset or something would have made it just like the best day. But it was just, I've realized that it is a lot of the simple things that I really enjoy. Like I love just a good coffee from my favorite coffee shop and playing pickleball and just being like quality conversation around people. I will say, since living in St. Pete, there are so many things I still have not done. I've been here for like 6 months, and people will be like, oh my gosh, have you been to this like this thing or that thing or this restaurant or that coffee shop? And I'm like, no, I haven't. And they're like, what? Like, that's a St. Pete classic. You've got to go. I'm like, I think it's because I just genuinely enjoy my day to day and I like the life I have. And I'm not feeling like I need to rush into seeing everything. But there are so many things. And I do think it is good, though, to be intentional about actually experiencing the city. Like I want to start being like a tourist in my own city a little bit and going out of my way to check out new things. But that's like my perfect day, like a nice slow morning, a good coffee at my favorite coffee shop, some pickleball, and relaxing early in the evening.
Yeah, it really is the little things. I feel like a better question is maybe zooming out a little bit and thinking about what your ideal week looks like, because like you just said, it's not so much like there's not a ton going on in your ideal day, because we do like a slower day in general. Like that's my ideal day on a weekend, is a little bit slower. Like maybe I'm socializing for a couple of hours, but that's really it. But when I zoom out and look at it from a week perspective, my ideal week includes me socializing once in the week and once on the weekend. And that has like really been a good kind of like reframe for me of I still want to go out and do things and be intentional about seeing my friends and like nurturing those relationships, while also setting those boundaries around like spending time by myself as well. I will say, if the socializing is like going on a walk with a friend, I can do more than once a week. But if we're going out and like grabbing a drink or going to one of the outdoor like concerts or outdoor movies or doing something more intense, I really only want it to be once during the week. But sometimes there will be a week where I'm socializing a couple times, just like going on a walk with a friend or something, and then once on the weekend. So whether that be Friday night or Saturday during the day or Saturday night, that's my ideal time, is like, okay, I saw someone, so I'm not like spending the entire weekend alone, but I'm also giving myself a lot of alone time just to like enjoy my time in my city. And I agree with you on the like, there's a lot of things that you still haven't done, but I also think that that's kind of okay, especially when we're talking about like restaurants and things, because I have a folder in my Instagram of saved places to go in Nashville. And I started it before I came here. And every time I see something on my Instagram, I just like put it in there. And I was looking through it the other day and I was like, half of these places I didn't even go to. But like, that's fine, because to me, the experience of like going to see a new restaurant and stuff is more so, again, just about the socializing aspect of like, I want to spend time with my friends and nurture those relationships. So whether we're going on a walk or trying out a new restaurant, like that's fine to me. I don't care. So yeah, I try not to get too hard on myself about like trying all the cool new spots and all the trendy restaurants and stuff, because you realistically can't go drop $100 on a dinner like multiple times in a month. That's crazy.
For sure. I think like for me, it's funny because back when I was living in the suburbs, I would socialize once a week. My friends and I would go to this restaurant once a week. It was our favorite place. It became like pretty much a routine, or once every other week. And I did not socialize other than that. Like I would have weeks where I literally didn't hang out with a single friend because I only had two friends in the suburbs. So who am I seeing if my two friends are busy? Like I literally didn't have anybody else. But here I am doing something almost every single day. And I've actually had to be like, okay, we need some more alone time, because for example, last night I was supposed to go to pickleball and then we got hit with like a huge storm, and so I ended up spending the night by myself and just like deep cleaned my apartment and finished my Legos. And tonight I'm like hoping I can go to pickleball and get out and socialize. We'll see, because it's rainy season, so we might get rained out again. But even last week, I think I played pickleball Monday, Thursday, Friday. I had a networking event on a Wednesday. I went to a workout class on Tuesday. I mean, I went to workout class by myself, so I wasn't really talking to anybody, but I'm at church on Sundays. I'm talking to people. I feel like I'm out and about socializing a lot, which is so opposite of how I normally am because I was such an introvert, but it is good to take time to like be alone. I think when I think about my alone time, there obviously a good couch rot is always in order, but I want to be more intentional about my alone time. Like there's an area called Coffee Pot Boulevard, I think, here, that's like a bunch of beautiful homes. It's super cute area. And I'm like, okay, when I go on a walk, maybe I go there. Or if I'm going to go for a walk, maybe I walk to this little bookstore that everyone keeps talking about and I just kind of like wander around and check it out. Or I walk to a new coffee shop. Or yeah, when my friends and I, want to get dinner, we go to a new place or something. Just like actually, I don't want to leave St. Pete someday. If I do, I don't know if I'll live here forever or not. But if I don't want to leave here and be like, I didn't really see much of St. Pete. I kind of just did my day to day where I just did the same thing all the time. But I also think it's good because you can be a tourist in your own city, regardless of where you live, whether it's new or not. Because thinking about, I've lived here for 6 months, there's so much I didn't do or I haven't done yet, and things I want to do. The same would be true for if I went back to Boston. I mean, I was living in the suburbs, so I think I did everything the suburbs had to offer. But if I was in Boston, there's so much I've never seen, so many things, and you can really get creative about what those things are. We have one more question on here that I feel like can answer quickly because we've been yapping for so long. But this question is financial steps to take before/after the move.
I feel like I don't have a ton for this one. I think the biggest thing, a lot of them are before. I actually don't have one singular piece of advice left in my brain for after the move because you're just recovering. Moving is very expensive. And that's something that I feel like people don't talk about either, is like everyone says to move away in your 20s, but like let's talk about like the money behind that because it's very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have to make sure like you're going to be able to have a job when you move. Like
Yes.
we're very privileged in that our work is all remote and it doesn't matter where we live, but not everybody's in that situation. So that's probably the very first step in financially preparing for a move. But then I think the second one is really spending time to think through all of the costs and then add 20%. Like be very conservative about how much this is going to cost you in your savings. So let's say you're anticipating that this is going to cost you $10,000, save $12,000 because everything, little things add up. There are a million things, especially obviously we're thinking about if you're moving out of state, but even if you're just making a local move, moving can be super expensive. So yeah, just be super conservative and like start the process early and start saving early because you never know what's going to pop up.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, really save to move. I saved $10,000, or no, $11,000 to move. I saved 10 grand, and then I was selling all my items in my apartment. It got me another like 11 or 1,200, I think. And so whatever that added up to, I had, and I still like spent that money on all of the things. And it is stuff, even like having to register my car here and just like get new license plate and a new license and like all of that type of stuff, and installing certain furniture or hanging different things in my apartment and whatever. That costs money to like pay a TaskRabbit to do stuff. And I did so much of it myself. Just like delivery fees on things. There really is just so much that comes with the cost of moving that you don't even really think about. So yeah, save and then add 20% is a great way to approach it. And then after the move, I feel like honestly, just keep a little extra for the lingering things. Like even this week I just paid, what did I just buy? A rug for my living room, and it's coming out of my like fun money sinking fund because my moving sinking fund is no longer there. But it probably would be good to have like some extra for like, furnishing your space. But then also, yeah, I guess if you have a sinking fund beforehand, then you're not draining your savings, but don't drain your savings to move. Like make sure you have a sinking fund because Lord have
Yeah.
mercy, it's expensive.
The other two things that I'll mention for like before the move is think about the time of year that you're moving, because that's going to impact how expensive your rent is. Because rent typically, this might not be true for like non-northern places, but like if you get an apartment in Pittsburgh in December, it's going to be significantly cheaper than an apartment in July. So think about that. And then the second one is when you're thinking about where you're going to live, don't sign a lease in an apartment that you can only afford with the leasing special, because I don't want to say I made that mistake. Like I could afford it if I decided to stay, but it would be significantly more expensive to where they kind of incentivize you to move again. And then even if you're making a local move, moving is just so insanely expensive just in general. There's always so many little costs that add up. So you don't want to be in a situation where you like enjoy your rent and then it's going to go up $600 a month, because that's the situation that I would have been in.
100%. 100%. And I also too think when you're thinking about your apartment and the financial side of it is like, think about going back to the neighborhood thing, think about where you're living and make sure that your rent is a balance of I can afford this and I like where I'm living, because there are like if you're willing to drive 30 minutes to things in the city and you want to save money and live outside the city, that's fine. But also, like if I'm being very serious, very real with myself, there's no way I'm driving 30 minutes. Like if pickleball was 30 minutes away, I would not be going as much as I am. And I feel like that would impact my experience that I'm having. So while I'm paying more for this apartment than I would ideally want to be paying for an apartment, I would love to pay zero for an apartment if we're being very serious. But unfortunately, that won't exist. But I'm paying more than I would like to. However, it's still within budgets. I can very much afford it, but I feel like I get a significant amount of value and I'm very happy with my choice because of the proximity that I have to things that I care about. So I would think about that. I would also run the numbers on like run a mock budget on what your expenses will look like, because even being here, I mean, I knew that like my AC or my electric was going to be more because running the AC here more often just like makes sense. I literally turned the AC on like once last year in Massachusetts in like August. I hardly ever turned it on. So my bill was significantly cheaper. But like, think about those things. Think about Florida has the highest car insurance rates in the country. Think about that, like factor that into your expenses, because there are things that you just like won't really think about, or like health insurance costs, like look at what that would be, how is that going to change when you move, really run the numbers on all of those things. But yeah, I don't know if I have any advice for like the after the move thing other than just like take a deep breath, because you're going to feel crazy when all the money is just like flying out the window, but you have to buy things to furnish your apartment and to move. But yeah,
Yeah, I
crazy.
agree. And if you have any more questions related to moving to a new city, put them in Spotify, because we love talking about this. And I'm moving literally this weekend. So I'll probably have more to say after I do another out of state move here in a couple of days. So, and I'm not looking forward to it. That's what I'm going to do after we film this episode, is go pack up all of my belongings, because I'm leaving in a few days, which I'm actually so sad about. I love my Nashville apartment so much, but that's a whole other story. But with that, that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love all of your comments, questions, feedback in Spotify, or you can DM us on Instagram at The Life You Love Pod. We love hearing from you guys, but thanks for tuning into the podcast, and until next week.